Commissioner Page. Commissioner Morrison. Here. Commissioner Tate.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Graham.
Present.
Commissioner Newell.
Present.
Johnson, Tricia Davison. No. Craig Stanley.
Here.
Mark Crow.
I don't see him.
Steve Thompson.
Here.
Glenn Moda.
Here.
David.
McCulk.
Oh, good morning. And Alex? No, Alex? Perfect, thank you.
Ryan Rickles is also here.
Thank you.
Okay. We've got two guests with us today, so if I could have a motion for freedom of the floor for Dave and for Steve. Thanks, Mayor Morrison. Can I have a seconder? Cheryl? All those in favor? That carries. So I'm just providing freedom of the floor for our guests here at the table today. And let's move on to the traditional land acknowledgement. We acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we are meeting today. Before you, you have today's agenda. Upon review, are there any late items or amendments or reshuffles from anybody? If not, can I have a mover? I've got Kate and I've got Morrison. And any opposed? The agenda is carried. You have minutes before you. Any concerns, comments, or suggestions for the minutes? Seeing none, we'll receive those. And that takes us to our delegation. Today we have Nelson Karas to speak to the project they have in front of them. Steve, take it away.
Okay, sure.
Sorry, maybe.
My understanding was there were going to be other presentations in advance.
Andrea Wilkie.
Yeah. Where's Andrea?
Here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
He usually comes to hear about what they've done since I've been at the table.
Andrea and Ron, could you join us and give us a delegation, give us your presentation on the Kootenai Film Commission's work that you've been up to?
Thanks. So Ron's going to really take the lead on this, but I'll kick us off. So I'm Andrea Wilkie. I'm the Executive Director at Community Future Central Kootenai. And the City of Nelson secured funding through a REDIC grant from the province of BC to do planning and infrastructure development on developing a film studio. So Ron LeBlanc, who's online, is going to give an update on that project.
Ron, take it away.
Great, thank you. I wonder if I can share a screen here. Do I have permission to do that?
Good. Can you see it?
Yeah, there we go. Great. Now you should be able to see, it's just a one pager, just for notes. But yeah, thanks for the opportunity, everybody. Really what Andrea and I are in the meeting today for is to kind of touch base, inform and update the commission about the work we've been doing to help develop the regional film industry and particularly with regards to Nelson. And also there's some questions about the project that we're working on. And so we want to raise the question about, what is the future recreational use for this Nelson Civic Arena? So, our request is to get some kind of, just some information from the commission eventually to give us a sense of what the future looks like for recreation in the Nelson Civic Arena. We're working on some assumptions right now, and we're questioning those assumptions. So just a little bit of background. I know some of you in the room are familiar with our project. Some of the Nelson councillors, we've done a delegation to the Nelson, City of Nelson Council. So they're familiar with that, but there's a few more things to add to that. And some of you this might be new to you. So just to back it up a little bit, a little more than a year ago, Community Futures got a grant from ETSI-BC, Columbia Basin Trust, Nelson and Area Economic Development Partnership, and the Slocan Valley Economic Development Partnership to study the regional film sector and create a report. And we did that, and it's available to the public, called Developing the Kootenay Regional Film Sector. And we worked with the Kootenay Regional Film Commissioner on that very closely. So part of that report was to study the feasibility of developing some assets in the area to help attract more film production to Nelson and area. So specifically, we looked at a seasonal film studio and production offices. And in this case, we looked directly at the Nelson Civic Arena because it was identified by stakeholders and the city as a potential venue for that. So as Andrea mentioned, the City of Nelson received a REDUP grant this spring to take that to the next level and look at the planning. What would that look like? And so we're in the middle of that project of doing the planning for some seasonal film studio and production office facilities in the Nelson Civic Arena specifically. And I just want to, in early stage here, just say that what we're talking about is, filling in the gaps around recreation, not displacing recreation. We're looking at how do we use that facility when it's not being used and in a way that develops economic development and economic diversification and supports the arts and culture sector in the Nelson area. So as this proceeded, Community Futures signed a MOU with the City of Nelson to develop the project. So that's a CF project right now. And we're going to wrap up this planning project in September. So we're midstream on that. And the idea is that we want to do the planning part and have that complete so that we can leverage that information and include it in a second application to REDUP. And for those that aren't familiar with REDUP, it's provincially funded and Rural Economic Development and Infrastructure Project, I think is what it stands for. It's been so long. So we want to apply for a second grant that would help fund the capital costs of doing that work. So right now, planning and hopefully a year from now, we'll be looking at implementation of that. In our discussions with the City of Nelson, it resulted in the council passing a resolution to direct city staff to enter into negotiations with Community Futures. So come up with kind of a cost sharing or profit sharing, however you want to look at it, a relationship to manage that activity outside of recreation for specifically Nelson Civic Arena, but also, should it expand to some of the other buildings in that campus, then that would be included as well. But we're not looking at that right now. And the idea is that for Community Futures to help, again, develop the regional film sector through that arrangement with the city. So we've done some investigations. We've had some contractors come in and have a look at the facility, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with that facility and knowing that it is, it's got a sand floor, and for film work we need a solid concrete floor to move equipment around on. So we're looking, from our perspective, we're looking at how do we help convert that space so it's usable for film studio, but also for recreation. And the contractors that we've had that have come in and looked at that have given us a quote, and it's not a competitive quote. It's just, for information, let's say, but it is a quote. And it looks like, to do everything that facility needs to continue as an ice arena, it's pushing $2 million. It's certainly, some of that would be under the responsibility, I would say, of the RDCK as the NDCC share a refrigeration plant with the Civic Arena. But most of it is, 1.5 at least of that is just in tearing up the hockey floor or the ice arena right now and replacing it with kind of a modern version of that with the boards and all the fixings. So that's, it would be at least $1.5 million. So that's, so what we're doing right now is looking for funding through REDUP in the fall. We'll apply. Maximum contribution from the province of that it pushes about $1 million. And of that, we would not just look at replacing the floor of the arena, but also building some production offices, which are just basically boxes, multi-use, storage area, etc. There's a lot of potential for different uses and different user groups when it's not being used for film, say. But that might cost us $100,000 or something like that, in addition to the ice arena. So we would be looking at applying to resurface that arena in the fall, and really this is where we're at. This is the crux, and this is where we really want to tap into the Rec Commission and hear what you have to say. Again, I want to stress that we're not here to replace recreation or displace the recreational user groups. We're not here to define how that building should be used. We're looking for some direction on that. But we're looking at augmenting the usage and having multiple benefits. It's in terms of job creation, economic development, and cost sharing, where this could be a profit generating or certainly an income generating venture. It might be able to offset some of the costs associated with recreation use of that facility. So we're looking for win-win right here. Really, so far to date, we've been working on the assumption that the city, the Rec Commission, and the recreational users and the taxpaying public would like to see that continue as an ice arena. So that was always our assumption. Who wants to displace hockey players in Canada? It's our national sport. So we were just assuming that that's what people wanted. In our conversation with Joe, he challenged that and said, "Hey, actually, we're questioning that ourselves. What's the highest and best use for recreation? Have recreational patterns changed in the city? There is a long-term campus review process that's going on that's going to poll the public and see how they would like to use spaces like that. So there's some information that would be very valuable to us in our project. But yeah, I just want to underscore too, in our, this is just a little tidbit that I forgot to mention, but in our work with the contractors, we're told that the facility as it stands is well beyond its anticipated use, term of life there. It's at the end of life. And so no matter what happens, the city and the Rec Commission have to think about what's next. And obviously there's a price tag attached to that. So I think it's timely. And I understand the refrigeration plant is also at the end of its life. And so, yeah, just moving forward, what we would like to ask the Rec Commission is, what is the best use of the arena? Is it a refurbished ice arena? Is it a general purpose recreation arena? Is it something else? And again, how do you go about finding that answer? I mean, that would be up to you. But can this topic be kind of included in the long-term campus review? And if that's the pathway forward, and that's what you decide, then we can work with two different scenarios in our application, because we have a deadline for the next REDUP grant application. It's the end of October, and I don't think we'll get feedback from the long-term campus review until early next year. So our intention is to submit an application with two scenarios, and then refine our application with a supplemental once we hear back from you folks. So that's kind of what that brings us, I think, to a conclusion in terms of what I wanted to share right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and kind of open it up for some questions, discussion.
Thanks. Appreciate that, Ron. Thanks for that overview and giving us an update on the project. Commissioners, do you have questions or our guests? Go ahead, Dave.
What other venues have you looked at for this project?
Well, what we've done is we've met many times with Kevin Cormack and asked him what are the suitable assets that the city has, and he has consistently pointed us back to this venue.
So supplemental, is it only city venues or is there independent locations in the city? Like, have you, the reason I'm asking is there's a couple of buildings that are partially done that you could suit and use for that purpose. Because I know that the curling was hoping for a shared ice plant for both the arenas. I know that the skaters were looking for additional space. And I know that hockey isn't really crazy about losing the access potentially to it for growth in the community for tournaments, etc. So, sorry, my name's Dave McCulloch. I'm here representing Nelson Regional Sports Council. So this it's great that you're looking at this on the economic side of things, but it would have an impact on the user groups in the community.
Well,
And it's seasonal or is it year round?
that's the key, is that it's seasonal. So what the idea is, our intention from day one was to work around, say, the ice users schedule. So basically, when the ice comes up, then we start looking at film production, and when the ice goes in, we stop. So the idea is not to displace the user groups, and if anything, we want to improve and extend the life of that facility. So, and in terms of private versus public, the model that we're looking at, the numbers aren't going to work to build like a purpose-built, say, private film studio in Nelson, because quite frankly, it's going to sit idle and empty for much of the year. And that model won't work economically. What does work is this fit of the win-win, where there's a city-owned building with a land owner that is, just kind of an angel landowner that can work with us and to help provide other benefits to the city, and in terms of job creation, et cetera. And then we can provide some income that would not have otherwise been there. So it's this kind of unique model that mixes recreation with some economic driver.
Thank you.
Can I add to that, Ron? And as part of the research that was done with the ETSI-BC funding, they did look at film studios in other parts of Western Canada and probably beyond that. And so it was based on that research that we landed on this model that often a private film studio is not viable, but models like this have worked in other places. So that's what put us in this direction.
Okay, great. Kate? Sorry, Tom first. I saw Tom first and then Kate. Go ahead, Newell.
Yeah, I was wondering about the curling rink. Good morning, by the way. Yeah, Tom Newell here. So yeah, David's question answered kind of the general gist of what I was wondering.
If I'm not wrong, Ron, I think height is a consideration, but not that it takes curling out of the running, but there's some advantage to the height.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kate.
Thanks. Good morning. Not the first time I've been talking about this. I seem to be at all the tables, which is awesome. Hi, Ron.
Hi.
How did it go reaching out to the user groups and get those conversations going and just keeping everybody in the loop, so that it occurs to me when you're talking about, okay, floor replacement, 1.5 million, and then the removable boards, which is kind of an improvement. The current norms, that when you talk and hockey and such, that there could be access to additional granting streams. So I was just curious how those conversations are going.
Yeah. So your first part, as far as the user groups, we're kind of following a path, if you like, in before reaching out to them. So I've put that on hold until we met with Kevin Cormack, because we were looking for some direction from him. And Andrew and I just were able to meet with him yesterday to talk about all these different. This project is very specific. We're here to develop this film studio project. We obviously want to consult with folks, but some of this stuff gets beyond the scope of our project. For example, to take it to the extreme, doing a public engagement process to get feedback on that is well beyond our capacity and scope. And so just looking for some direction from him. And so really he is going to be our point person for this project, just to simplify. But yes, we definitely want to inform the user groups and engage to some extent. So this was the next step, the rec commission. And then from this, I plan to send out an information email, let's say, or a letter to the user groups and open up for questions. So that's yet to be done, Kate.
Okay. So the other thing that I find interesting as this rolls around in my head is that with these public buildings, this is, and I don't really know what your group is called, Kootenay Film Development Society. I just made that up. Is there a name for? So does that, because is it a for-profit enterprise a little bit, right? Like it's not a nonprofit, like say the Capitol Theater Society.
Go ahead, Ron.
Well, we're still part of the planning project that we're doing right now is governance. And so this is unfolding as we speak. And what is the model that we're looking at? Yeah. So right now, the idea for the city to sign an MOU with Community Futures, well, we're a nonprofit, as you know. And the idea is to share that income, hire a studio manager, say, or liaison for film. And that would be kind of a cost to the project, but there's no element of this as it stands that is a for-profit venture. It's all, let's see how much money that we can, let's cover our costs. Let's see how much money we can funnel back to the city to help, upkeep this building. So as it stands, that's how it is. We're only talking about nonprofit right now.
So it effectively becomes another user group in an arts and culture space, arts, culture, recreational space. Does that sound right? I'm trying to understand like how all of the moving pieces can come together in the end.
Yeah. I'd like to bring Andrea into the conversation because she really wants to talk about that stuff.
Andrew, would you maybe prime a little bit with the commissioner, the film commissioner, because that's what this work originally generated out of, right?
So I'm going to go a couple steps back. So one point I just want to clarify is to go back to Kate's question about engaging user groups. I want to clarify that we're really looking to the rec commissions. Is it called your long-term campus review? So that's going to really inform, the direction of the use of the space, and the film studio project will be seeking to complement that. So I think our role is to inform those user groups that we're looking to develop a complementary film studio space, but we're really looking to the rec commission's engagement to let us know, what the community says in terms of how they'd like to see that space used. In terms of the governance piece, that's still being worked through. And I think you raised some great questions there, Kate, in terms of let's get clarity. Is this a for-profit? Is it a non-profit? Is it a standalone entity? And so that's part of the work that we're doing right now. And then to go back to your film commissioner question, so just to provide some clarity around that. So Creative BC funds film commissioners around the province. And right now in the Kootenay region, it's the Civic Theatre Society in partnership with Kootenay's Rockies Tourism that holds that contract for this region. They're going through a transition in terms of the film commissioner role. So the film commissioner that Ron mentioned was involved in the first stage of this project. He's got a great background and contacts in the industry. However, he's no longer in that position. And so the Civic Theatre and Kootenay's Rockies Tourism are restructuring that role. And my understanding is they're going to hire a West Kootenay film commissioner and an East Kootenay film commissioner. So that's still in the works. But we are keeping those lines of communication open with the Civic Theatre and Kootenay Rockies Tourism just to make sure that we're complementing each other. So does that answer that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds like it's still in process, so we don't know what it would look like in the end, which is totally fine. And I'm gonna just say again, because I know Andrea and Ron and I have spoken about this offline a little bit. I'm not suggesting that you engage with the user groups. I'm suggesting that you open communication because it's a small town and everything goes smoother when you wave at each other at the three-way stop, as opposed to being like, that's that freaking guy at the three-way stop, right? Everything is better if you already know each other and a little waving. And we know that sport and rec and culture, that's one thing that brings community together, or many different facets of what brings our community together. It's what makes Nelson so livable and so desirable to be here are these different community groups, whether it's the Nelson Civics Theater Society or the tennis club, whatever it is. And so having that conversation and that communication and just knowing who is who, I think will be really helpful moving forward, and also gives access to additional grants for the same overall project. So I think we really just need to make sure that it doesn't feel like anyone's getting blindsided.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's hard to do because it feels like, oh, now I have to engage. No, I'm not saying engage. I'm not saying surveys. That's definitely the role of the rec commission, and it's an ongoing process, but just making sure that we recognize each other and can, like you do, like, oh, that Dave guy from that sports group.
Gotcha.
He's awful at the three-way stop.
Okay,
I
great.
do have one follow-up question. The initial grant, so the city and your dialogue started prior to the initial grant, so your discussions with Kevin Cormack was part of your initial funding?
So to clarify, so the first bit of funding we got was from EDCBC, and that was just to do an analysis of what opportunities exist for the regional film sector and what gaps exist, and that's where we identified, film studios a gap, and it would be great to have one. And then the second round of funding that we received from the province was looking at infrastructure planning, finding the location, figuring out what the cost would be to upgrade a facility, and basically to line us up for future grant applications.
So 2023, beginning of 2024?
Ron, can you help me here? When did we start this project? I feel like about a year ago?
Yeah, it was a year ago, a year and a half, really, when we actually applied for the ETBC grant. So I'm going to say year and a half. It's pushing almost, in the fall, it'll be 2 years probably.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, SEDC is really positioned to look at that economic development, whether it's ground transport or film production or cannabis agricultural investment, and that funding pocket is really like, what is the region looking at, what infrastructure exists, what do they need, and then once that big picture was taken, then it was like, where can we solve some of these issues?
Yeah.
I have a couple questions. So Tricia, you've been writing down some notes. Are we able to capture, like we're doing with the affordable housing question, this for the public so they can weigh in on our survey?
Yeah, so through the chair, so yes, not unlike the affordable housing conversation. So just for clarity for everybody on the call or in the meeting today, we have this project has a working group which is made up of all of this commission, as well as multiple regional district staff, City of Nelson staff, and through that working group, the survey questions that will be part of the engagement and how the communication goes out through our pop-up meetings will all occur in consultation with that group. So anything that we think one can ask some questions to help clarify the highest and best use of lots of different things related to the campus study, while not directing people specifically to a particular answer, because we have to be very careful with that. Will absolutely be part of the careful structuring of those questions. So that is very much in the works. And I know our hope is to have the pop-up meeting starting in September, which I do recognize it is July 31st today. But our process is getting underway in the fall when we know people are sort of back and in the regular routine of life again. So I don't know if that answered your question, Keith. But.
Yeah, it does. So we'll have a question. Cheryl, I see you. I hope I didn't miss your hand from before. And then I also see Tom. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Thank you. So this is really good morning, and thank you, Ron, for all this great information. Yeah, my question really is, I am hearing these numbers of $2 million and $1.5 million to do these, like, where are these numbers coming from? Are they a guess? Do we have estimates? Like, I'm just wondering where they're coming from and if they're going to be part of this public information or this public outreach that we are talking about. Thanks.
Okay, go ahead, Ron.
Yes, to answer that, yeah, we do actually have a quote from a contractor that specializes in ice arenas that came and did a site visit and did a very comprehensive quote. It's listed, and I don't know, I may be able to share that with the commission. I'm not sure if there's if I need to check in with anybody about that, but I personally am willing to share that information. Yeah, it's very detailed, very specific around that. And the price is very specific around what they're offering. So yeah, it's kind of $1.5 million to do that work. And then there's, on top of that, there's a contingency of like maybe $150,000 or $200,000 because they don't know what's going to happen when they start digging. So there's some contingency money in there. The refrigeration plant was around $300,000. So we have very precise numbers. It's not a competitive bid. It's not to say we couldn't get that for maybe 10% less or something. I don't know if it went to a competitive bid, but those are real numbers.
Okay, excellent. Ron, I will just jump in here. I hope you have a heritage contingency component to that, because the older these things are, the more surprises they tend to bring. Cheryl, you have a follow-up?
My only follow-up would be whether staff has this information or like, could we get it, or are we going to duplicate the work by getting more quotes? So if it's already been done, that would, to my mind, be something that would be really great to share.
Okay. We usually do an update on the Civic in this time of the year, budget-wise and everything. So when we do that update at our, I think, next meeting, we can include what that might look like as for information. I do want to say, though, with the ice plant replacement coming, and the needs that come out of that, with the user groups that use it for hockey, maybe needing conversations and working groups, they might have things while things are getting torn up that make sense to incorporate. If this was moving ahead, I think these numbers at this time, for the 2 million, they have one lens, they have one perspective. It might be a problem to put it out there, then people think that's what's happening. I would be very concerned about that because we're so early in discussions right now. I feel like those numbers are meant to be a guiding post and get a sense of where things fall in generalities. But I think as part of the Civic update, we could see what that looks like. And I will remind Commission, the capital of that building is the City of Nelson. That's the arrangement we have now. That's the responsibility where it lies. But Craig seems to want to say something.
Well, through the chair, we will bring a report on the Civic Center operations to the next meeting, but we will reach out. I know Joe's had a conversation, as have I, with city staff about some of the long-term planning for the Civic Arena, and I'm not sure where that sits with the city, so we're just going to make sure that we're going to be careful where we talk about that, but we could, between now and then, have more information specifically about that project and how it ties into our we are replacing the refrigeration plant in 2026, and so that could be part of that. But we'll try to integrate that in the Civic report in the August meeting.
Okay, great. Tom?
Here's my internet's a little unstable, they say, so I've been in and out of video. Very interesting, and this question is, I hope I word it so that it's no disrespect or anything. Is this session for our preliminary information of what is happening, or is something specific being requested from the commission today? And I may know the answer, but I just wanted to double check on that, and maybe that's through to the chair first of all, and then see how he wants to handle that.
So, Tom, primarily we're here for information and get everybody on the same page. The the Film Commission has a broader scope than just the city of Nelson, but this project that serves the needs identified in that larger report is specifically within the campus. And so the ask most specifically is making sure that our long-term campus review captures that and that commission's aware of that and that we're asking those questions and that public engagement's been done in an authentic and reliable way we can lean on, everyone can lean on in the future, as well as we're looking at these conversations that, you know, there'll be competing interest to shape this project. And so getting those conversations started early, which includes us, because we're a long-term operator and the user groups of hockey and ice will also have things they will want to see develop long-term. So let's make sure, we're having these conversations earlier, and also getting clarity around our roles and reminding of where we all serve the recreation system in this area.
Thank you. May I have a separate question? This is to Ron. So we've had a presentation from the Civic Theater Group last month or the month before. Very interesting, and their broad, wide-ranging interest in film, etc. You touched on it and maybe even alluded to it. What's your partnership relationship with that growing and visionary group?
Andrea, do you want to take that call, that answer?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Tom. So it's evolved over the course of this project. So initially, the film commissioner who was employed by the Civic Theater Society was also a subcontractor on this project to inform the work. Because that relationship has now changed and the film commissioner is no longer employed by the Civic Theater Society, we've had to adjust a little bit. We have had lots of conversations with the Civic Theater Society. They are supportive of the idea of a film studio in Nelson. We do want to ensure that we're not creating confusion in the marketplace. So there still will very much be a role for a film commissioner in our region to recruit and bring projects to the area. And we see this project as developing an asset that is going to enhance our ability to bring productions to the region. So conversations are ongoing, and we're both keeping each other informed.
Thank you. I didn't mean to put anyone on the spot. Just thought I'd tie in two delegations back to back and see if there was a connection. Thanks very much.
And I just want to remind those who haven't sat around some of those other tables that the Civic is going through its renovations right now. So that society is certainly has a lot of work on their plate right now, specifically around their space. And there's capacity that is fully subscribed, I believe, from that small group of workforce. So they're focused in on getting to the other side of that successfully as they've spoken to at council. Kate.
Thank you. Somebody else just brought it up. It might have been you, Chair. The operating agreement, I believe it expired this year. I'm new, so is that something that we'll know or comes through Rec Commission if there's any changes to that agreement? I think it was a 2-year or 5-year. I read it earlier this year and I knew it was expiring in June. The operational agreement of the Civic.
Yeah, through the chair, we'll bring that as part of the Civic report as well.
Yeah, maybe some draft language around long-term planning, what that looks like, right? If we're going to be operating this for 700 years, we should have a planning process in place.
And then the other piece of it that I'm just curious, because it's all coming in from having sat at Allrec, and through the chair, just tell me that this is not the right place for the question. With knowing that the Pioneer Arena is going to be closed in however many short years, and looking at recreation, arts, culture, recreation from a regional perspective, it occurs to me that would be a new moving factor in how we provide services for the region and just have that kind of buzzing in the back of our heads. I know we always feel like, oh, Castlegar is way down there on the highway, but if you look at it from a regional perspective, or if you've been to the city lately, minutes to go to the pool all the time, and like maybe that is something just to be considering when we're looking at regional recreational facilities. It had been slated to be closed this year, but I think they got another year life on it. Thank you. all the moving pieces.
Sorry, I totally missed that. Can you say that again? I realized that was coming to me. My apologies. Try that again.
Oh, what I said, just keeping in mind
Yes.
that the Pioneer Arena will be closing in the next year or two, and then looking at recreation from a regional perspective. So that's one less arena in the, 150 kilometer radius or, 55 kilometer radius, just to have that awareness of what that looks like regionally as we're moving forward, planning for the future.
Yeah, through the chair, absolutely. And that is a very big topic of conversation that we are having as staff. And I'm not sure that even user groups really quite understand what that impact is going to be regionally, because we are talking a lot about that of course, in the Castlegar and district area, because that's, in that service area. But absolutely, I believe that once pressure really hits and people start sort of moving around in those spaces or seeing what that could look like, how people start to utilize spaces is going to change significantly. And so if there is, for some reason, a change to the Civic Center arena here, obviously it's another challenge to actually have to try to deal with. And it's, I don't even know that we can forecast what that'll look like. We're having that conversation just at another level of hockey as well, and trying to sort of forecast what that's going to look like. And it's very difficult because it's a significant shift in culture, even just with the loss of the Pioneer. So, and just how people use those spaces.
Okay, great. Seeing no further questions. Thank you, Andrea and Ron, for giving us an update. Sorry to misidentify you earlier on. Thought I knew what was going on in the agenda. I did not. And we'll let you go. We can.
I stick around for the.
Oh yeah, 100%. You can all stick around.
Great. Well, I'll just bow out. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thanks, Ron.
Thanks for the opportunity, and doors open. And I think just as a matter of process, my intention is to pass on that quotation for that work to Kevin Cormack, and then from there, if the Rec Commission wants to access that information, then that's the channel, I would say, is through Kevin. So so thanks again, everybody. I'm in Kelowna on evacuation from the Slocan Valley, so hence the Zoom call. So have a good meeting, and I'll bid you adieu.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. That takes us on to 7.1, which is our district and community complex quarterly report from Ryan. And so Ryan, take it away.
Sure. Morning, everyone. I'll give a brief review of the report that's included in your guys' agenda package this morning. Beginning with the Civic Center operations, just tying in a little bit to the kind of what we've been talking about, but this is just an update that staff have discussed with City of Nelson staff, and at this point, it's been indicated that the beginning of our ice season should not be impacted by the work that is happening in the Civic building at this time, but that there could be an impact at the end of the season. I think a couple of weeks, in fact, I think it could be an early closure around the end of February, I think.
Correct.
Yeah. An aquatic hours of operation update. So due to the increase of staff availability in the spring, including supervisory staff, we've been able to increase our aquatic operating hours closer to the 2020 service level. And our fall hours of operation are expected to remain the same as the spring 2024 hours were. Update on our annual shutdown. So the NDCC Aquatics facility will be closed for its annual pool shutdown from September 2nd to the 15th. The NDCC Fitness Studio will be closed August 25th to September 1st, and the NDCC Fitness Center will be closed for its annual shutdown on September 2nd and 3rd. Our NDCC concession RFP closed on July 17th. We had no proposals submitted by the deadline, and so staff are currently working with the previous concession operator as well as other user groups to determine if there's any further interest in this opportunity. a project update, our air handler replacement. This has been on this report for a while, but the installation has been delayed due to some supply chain issues, but all of the equipment and materials are now on site. And so we're working with some mechanical consultants and contractors to coordinate the install for the fall of 2024. And our pool boiler replacement, there's been some work that started on the ducting and mechanical, but the actual boiler installation will occur during the annual pool shutdown. This will minimize the impact on the operation, so we shouldn't have to have a facility closure for the aquatic center to complete that. And then finally, just a quick staff update. Our NBCC Aquatics roster is sitting at about 96% of our 2020 staffing levels. And so we have some improved availability from staff, and so that's what enabled us to increase our hours of operation. So we're starting to feel like we're getting over the bump there for aquatic staffing. We are anticipating a bit of turnover at the end of the summer with some staff leaving for school and whatnot, but we have recruitment underway, and we don't anticipate any service disruption from that.
Okay, great. I see hands from Kate.
Thanks. Can you clarify for me that first paragraph in the report, the early closure due to the arena envelope? For some reason, that's not pinging in my head as something that I remember. What's the building envelope on the arena?
What is the building envelope? So
Like, what project is that?
That's the civic
Arena
project.
We've
Arena?
heard some stuff at City Council about the Civic Center Arena.
The envelope?
Yeah, just the inspection that comes off of looking at the other part of the building.
Sorry, say it again slower. I'm just having a hard time hearing.
So as we look at the Civic Center Theater project and all that construction,
Yeah.
that has cast our eye to the connected part of the building, which is the arena,
Yeah. Okay.
which has left open some questions about, what we're doing in that envelope, which I think you're saying the city is informing that by the end of the season, the city might want to get in there and do some work, but we don't have clarity around what that work would look like yet.
Oh, okay. So we don't have clarity. Okay, good. Sounds good.
But
I know that the ice schedule tends to go with the SD8, like the spring break calendar. So that's a few weeks early, but end of February is around the usual closure time anyway. So it doesn't sound super early to me, but I just wasn't sure if I knew more about it than I know about it. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Go ahead, Dave.
On the air handler and the time supply chains and the timing on that, will that impact either the aquatic center or any of the user group?
So it's the air handler unit that serves the administrative area and the lobby of the building, so it won't impact the aquatic center. Depending on what we determine from the mechanical consultants, I think there could be a little partial day service disruption while the unit's lifted onto the roof, but we're still waiting on clarity for that.
Okay. Cheryl.
Thank you. And thank you for this report. It's always appreciated. And I may have asked this question before, but I can't remember, so I'm going to ask it again. What are the numbers in the brackets in the staff report for the aquatics?
Yeah, so through the chair, those are staff that are off on leave.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I had a question. We had talked earlier in the spring about the need on a broad basis for better grounds management across multiple facilities. I'm wondering where we're at with that. Specifically, I see some dead trees. I see some leveling that needs to happen in green spaces. Maybe some other grounds work that would just make that entrance work well for our public.
I was doing a bit of an inspection this morning through the chair. I agree that that's hasn't been our focus, and it will become our focus. And I think that that's something that we'll work with management and staff to look at building a plan. But I agree that that one particular green space, and certainly the bioswales for the drainage in the parking lot, are a little worn out. And in fact, you know, when we're talking about development in the vicinity, there's even the option to, because the parking lot is also starting to show its age, we could look at reconfiguring that parking lot. And so that green space conversation could be hardscape parking and bigger kind of picture project. But in the meantime, we'll work on enhancing the existing green space.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And that was going to be something across multiple facilities, or is that coming out of the Parks Department?
Through the chair, it's funded through the Service F226.
Yeah.
And so we don't have that overlap with parks just yet. And, you know, if we looked at restructuring our parks where they, department where they, you know, for example, oversaw the green space in, at the NDCC, but then even looked at the Creston complex and the Castlegar complex, there could be some opportunities there for synergy, but right now they're funded and operated out of each service.
Okay.
So we will get that.
Would contribute to the service for some change rather than having multiple staff doing multiple things. Correct. I need mowers and sand on the ground. Correct. Okay. Great. Any other questions? Seeing none, let's take us on to the school skate instruction program.
I will take that through the chair. Tia sends her apologies for not being able to be present today, so I will provide her report on her behalf. So just as a reminder for commission, so this is bringing back a conversation that started, well, probably started some time ago, but to my knowledge, from my involvement in the RDCK, I believe it started back in January, February or so. And there was some discussion around trying to figure out how we could provide skating instruction. It was predominantly focused around school groups in particular, but also I would say more in general. But the focus was predominantly around schools, so that's really what we're bringing back today. So the whole report aims to provide some overarching information for everyone's knowledge, as well as then ultimately a recommendation suggesting that you direct staff to bring back sort of budgetary implications for consideration at the probably September meeting, possibly August, for further consideration as we start to develop budgets into 2025. But there is work that we would need to do in the fall that doesn't have a budgetary impact in order to prepare for the 2025 opportunity. So just sort of to walk through some high-level topics within the report. I know you all have it in front of you. So historically, the skating clubs have been and continue to be the primary providers of skating instruction. To our knowledge and through conversation with the clubs in the region, they do continue to have capacity and grow their services to offer skating lessons. However, we do want to continue to try to figure out ways to offer that opportunity to people in an accessible way and see what the RDCK can do to provide some level of instruction where requested. So in this, if we go back in conversation, part of the question was schools potentially having an interest in paying for skating instruction as part of like an educational or physical literacy component of their physical education program. And the process that people could go through to date was felt to be a bit cumbersome and kind of more challenging for the school to coordinate. So we were trying to figure out ways to see if that was able to be simplified for people where possible. So to bring on staff, another conversation was around, there was often kind of comparables around how we fund swimming lesson instruction compared to skating instruction. So we just have provided a few bullet points there on the first page around historically why we have not done that. I probably don't need to go through them in detail, but certainly, you know, we continue to have ICE challenges of finding space available at times when certainly schools want to be able to come, as well as when we actually don't have other competing interests on the ice for different activities or regular recurring bookings, as I know all of you are well aware of. So we have worked to provide an overview of what we believe would be a solution that is more available to schools, that provides consistent opportunities as well as meaningful work for employees, where we might actually be able to have people stick around and be able to offer this service through us. So I'm going to jump into section 3, just if you're following along in your report. So I'm kind of in this sort of detailed analysis piece. So this is just some of the major considerations that we've had to look at and some of the things we've done on a preliminary basis to try to create a framework that allows us to do something in January. So one is certainly allocation. As I've just mentioned, ice availability is scarce. And so what we're trying to do is hold space through our allocation process that could be given to schools should they request this type of service. So we do ice allocation, I'm going to say roughly this time of year, that goes through the ice season so that people know, because obviously we have bookings and user groups that book for the ice season. So we wanted to make sure we had some opportunity, so we've held space for this particular service going forward. Don't ask me exactly what those times are because I don't know what they are, but I do know we've held space. And the goal would be that if that space is not needed, then it would obviously be freed up and given back as available space to anybody who might like to book it. So on the instructor acquisition side, we've certainly spent some time looking and chatting with the skating clubs to see how we could figure out utilizing the skill sets that those, we'll call the coaches, have within the skating clubs to provide that sort of instructional component that was parts of our discussion. So we learned a few things. So one is that they have insurance limitations for the number of people that they can have on the ice based on, I'm not exactly sure all the details, we just know it's limited based on how that opportunity, if run through the skating clubs, could work. So one of the things was to see if there was a means to hire those staff through us, and then we could change the structure where there still would be that, say, opportunity to have an instructional component, but we could offset it with what we classify as recreation leaders that could help sort of move a larger group of people through an instructional component almost in like a station to station opportunity, so that it doesn't look exactly like a full skating program, but it is some opportunity for instructional components or a structured activity for a school group. So the clubs believe that there is capacity and interest within some of their coaching staff. And so we would then have to go through a process to work with them, but ultimately go through our own recruitment process where we post a position, someone gets hired, and then we sort of go through our onboarding and they actually become an employee of ours versus through the skating club. But obviously the skating clubs would be utilized because that's where the resource currently sits. So on the risk side, as we talked about, ice allocations finalized before job postings go. So we don't know if the ice allocation that we're going to have or when schools are available to come is going to work with any of the instructional staff that we even hire. So it's a bit of a chicken before the egg thing. You never really know how that works. Obviously, our recruitment would be focused on trying to meet this service need. And then in the meantime, we would be trying to communicate with schools to say, hey, we're looking to create this opportunity with you and for you. Let's figure out how we can sort of work together and get them in our system, hoping that all the ducks line up and everything works as planned. Of course, these are specialty instructors. They have to have certain levels of certification, which is all part of the process of our hiring anyways. So on the communication side, our initial communication, so we start communicating with school groups on lots of different opportunities, usually in the fall. For the skating one, we would probably start talking to them in probably October after school sort of got settled into the school year, and let them know that this could be an option for them in January, and that as we confirm more details, we will certainly reach out to them, but for them to start expressing interest to us so that we have some ideas to how we can work together with them. So on the budgeting side, of course, when we do this work, there's usually subsidization required, which means there's a budget offset through our budgeting processes. So this is just highlighting, and I know this isn't new for anyone's information, but the things that come into the budget consideration are the costing of the service. And so what we want to do is kind of, my point at the very beginning was the ultimate recommendation is that you direct staff to come back to you with information identifying what this budget ask would be so that it could be built into the 2025 budget, assuming that there was agreement to proceed. And then, of course, over the first, it would be roughly from January till, say, the end of March, give or take, we would then be evaluating that service so that we could make plans going into the 2025, 2026 ice season, so that we can continue to sort of hone and build off of, hopefully the successes we would have in the winter season. So maybe I will leave it at that and open the floor for questions.
Thanks, appreciate it. Any questions from commission? Cheryl's at a hand? No. Go ahead, Dave.
In your presentation there, you said that this was brought forward to you by the school district 8 as an inquiry.
No, it was brought forward through discussion at the commission table.
So this was staff or rec?
No, it was public,
It was-
it came from public time
Came from
originally.
Public time, okay. And you already had dialogue with Nelson Skate?
I believe Nelson State would have been part of TSC, but yes, they're the primary reason that this whole thing started, so I would assume so, yes.
All right, and dialogue has taken place with School District 8 because when other user groups have approached School District 8 for impacting or coordinating and collaboration for having swimmers or hockey players or skaters to utilize their registration with local groups as part of school time, they've always poo-pooed it. So is that something that the collaboration would look at so that if there is youth in school who have registered for the skating, that they can have their skating lessons at the same time as this program being offered?
So
That would save the parents money. It would save the skating association for potentially losing registrants.
Yeah.
And it would optimize the usage of the ice time when it's not being used, so you wouldn't be competing with other user groups for prime ice space. It's just it's a win-win at that point in time. So I'm just wondering if that's part of the discussion and the collaboration that you're looking at.
yes, through the chair. So my knowledge of this is, as opposed to going to the full levels of skating instruction, so say like if you were going to a swimming lesson and progressing from whale to sea otter or whatever the progression might be, that this is around providing an instructional component, not necessarily progressive instructional lessons. So the idea, there might be that component to it if the schools wanted, if we could try to build that in. But at this point, it was trying to put some structure around the actual skating opportunity so that children, if they were at this particular activity, may have a positive experience, learn some new skills, maybe learn some of those fundamental pieces of how to be safe or glide or stop or do things properly.
Yeah.
And then the idea with the larger group and kind of in the station component was that they could be divided more to skill set. And then those leaders, through the coordinated effort of that specialty instructor, could actually develop games and activities while they're not in the instruction component that was maybe more specific to the skill level of that group.
See, and I'm just asking these questions so that when we're looking at it, because what we're seeing is the impact financially for parents on these extracurricular activities. They're falling away because of their cost of living, their cost of food, and the first thing to go is the extracurricular activities outside of school. So if we can find a way to combine those and have a win-win scenario where the district and the Rec 5 Commission are working directly with the user groups who are already established and struggling with how are we going to pay our coaches? How are we, our registration's dropping, and then we lose something because of this. So just identifying that so it's not going to impact that user group, because I know they were struggling with numbers already.
So
I'm getting a little lost in this.
Well, and for clarity, the direction we took was around putting structure to the activity to provide an elevated experience that had, versus like a free-for-all sort of public skate where there was felt to be a bit more, that was kind of the easy opportunity for schools to kind of come to sort of a booked time that just the school would come. And it was felt to be a bit chaotic. Maybe the teachers aren't necessarily equipped to sort of deal with the kids on the ice and sort of put some structure around it if people were interested in having that opportunity. It's certainly not going to be forced on the schools to go that direction. We do know that many schools just like to do sort of almost like a field trip activity where it is a bit more of that sort of free-for-all opportunity, kind of like coming to a swim session. But if there was a group that wanted to build in some component, that the option could be presented to them. Where the option we had to date was felt to be more administratively challenging to the school, which therefore was felt to be a barrier to that opportunity. So we're trying to reduce that. Could this evolve to something more? possibly. I think at this point, we're just trying to put some structure to it, so we have something to start with.
Just for clarity, Dave, what you're suggesting is, so there's not a competition for the assumption that, you know, one grade 4 student may go to a more structured casual RDCK run program versus a very structured progressive learning pathway in the skate system, that there be some creation of a funnel so that there's collaboration there.
Yeah.
That when they're going over, saying we have these casual programs, but we also have these structured lesson programs.
100%.
Yeah, and our goal would probably be to grow the pool of people with skate
regional
on
district and its programs. So a nonprofit group is struggling at this point in time in a lot of different ways, competing with the funding for the Rec 5 or the regional district and their programs and their advertisement and their ability to pay for all these training and pieces. They just can't compete. It's a struggle. So I'm just making sure that we're recognizing that.
Totally, and recognizing that we have to serve the public need to put skates on ice, and that's also what we have to be sure we're delivering as well, and try and make sure we're both able to be successful in doing those, because, you know, there's a lot to learn when it comes to skating. Are there any other questions? Okay, I think we're at a nice natural spot for a break. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, do we have to
There's
move
a
that
rec-
recommendation?
Thanks, Kate. There's a recommendation here. I do have a seconder to come back with budgets. Any objections? All those in favor? It carries. So the part of the report that really stood out for me was this is about drawing attention, awareness to the budgetary needs to support this service. So we'll get some numbers on the budgetary needs to support such a service should we go ahead with it. Great. Let's take a bio break for 8 minutes, which will take us to 10:15. There's bathrooms through the door on the left there. Fill up some water, maybe get some fresh air for 5 minutes. He's watching.
Must be.
It's good to our phone number. He says. Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Your arts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
okay, so as we get back, Kate, Tom, do we have you? I see Cheryl. I'm not sure I see you there, Tom. Excellent. Before we get started, just because we have Joanne and Ron Little with us who may want to speak to this, do we want to offer, I'd like someone to offer freedom of the floor for those two as a motion.
Sure.
Morrison, and seconded by Graham, and all those in favor? Carries. So just if you guys have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. Let's take us to the proposed Front Street Affordable Housing Project. The presentation from Joanne, the Housing Director of Nelson Care Society, proposes a Front Street Affordable Housing Project. And would Nelson Cares, would you guys like to take the lead on running us through what you have so far?
great. Well, thank you, Keith, and thanks to the commission for allowing us the opportunity again to update you on where we're at. At the last meeting, we got approval to move ahead with the feasibility study of the property and potential we could develop there. And we were fortunate that Cover Architecture was able to pull this together on a pretty short timeline. And so today we have a presentation in two parts. Rob Stacy will be presenting the results of Cover's initial look at the property and the preliminary design. And then I'll follow up with just an outline of the overall timeline and the funding deadlines that we have to meet to move the project forward. So I will
We're able to bring up
take the mouse here and
I suppose while he's getting the mouse, I'll also introduce Kelsey, an architect from our office, and Max, another architect from our office.
So we can't see the presentation online yet, just so you know.
Really? Okay.
I wouldn't lie about that.
Oh, we might just have the PDF open on this computer, not on the. Okay, we'll wait for a second. That's why it's so nice to come down. We have coffee, and we have people
No
in our
cookies.
rooms.
Donuts. There used to be.
That apparently falls on me.
I'm thinking that's directed.
Well, in 6 years, I'm just like, time to step up on here.
Can everybody see that now?
Can you see it, Kate?
Can you tell me what the name of the other architect was? I got Max and.
Kate, can you see that?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're up and running. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, I think
Rob, go ahead, Rob.
trade it over to me. Yeah. So there's a number of slides in here, but I'll just give a brief overview. Some of the pages are data, so I won't go through every line of them.
Mm-hmm.
They're more there for information. So we are brought into this to do a study of the potential of putting housing on the corner lot, which has been recently demolished, where there used to be a house, which was, I believe, the Eco Society once upon a time. But now it's an empty lot, and it's well suited for development of a number of things. It's currently zoned institutional I-1, so it doesn't support housing. So part of the study that we have been working on is to look at potential rezoning of that lot to something that would be consistent with the OCP for the city of Nelson, as well as support, the aims of the project in terms of density and number of units. But it was also a great opportunity to look at how it could be incorporated into some of the aims of the recreation complex there. We've reviewed some of the master planning documents that have been prepared over the last number of years. And one of the objectives was to expand the fitness space towards the corner lot. So there was a natural synchronization of the projects where you could leverage both of them towards a common goal and make it more economical than strictly an expansion or strictly a housing project. So what we've done here is explore that. So within this, we're looking at an appropriate zoning that would support those uses. And C1 is, the downtown core commercial, which has a pretty broad range of uses that are allowed, as well as a pretty high height in terms of buildings. So let's just get into it. And stop me any time along the way if you have questions.
I will.
Thanks.
And I can't see all your faces, so if anyone, use your mic, speak out, call for the chair if you want to have a question. Want to interrupt Rob?
Absolutely. And I'll call on Max and Kelsey on occasion to jump into. So this is, sorry, it's been a little bit laggy to get there, but we're getting there. So the corner lot is what's outlined there, and there's a, I'll just highlight it with my mouse. It'll respond.
Reach it this way. Here's
It is very slow, but it might be easier to describe it.
I'll just be more patient with it. So this is the corner lot where the mouse is, and it represents a number of lots that are all ganged up together. And then this little dashed line area is part of the recreation complex. And the difference is that this parcel of land is owned by the city of Nelson. This is regional district. Some photos. You've driven by there. It's been fun to watch the dismantling and demolition. These are some old elevation drawings from the original drawing set for the rec center. And we use this to look at some of the different levels because the elevation change from the front to the back of the lots is quite substantial. But in this case, it actually works well to our benefit because we can hit, the raised elevation of some of those rec center spaces, as well as have a few different access points for the housing at different levels. So you can see, there's basically 2 stories difference between the front and the back of the lot. Just slow. Okay, so this is a bylaw review. There's a lot of words in here, but basically we're looking at the C1 zoning, and it seems to make sense from the UNCP and these. So that's what we started to test. And it's worth mentioning, just as a caveat, as we're going into this, that this is not a design. So, a bunch of green blocks is not going to represent a building. It's more to show buildable area as it relates to some of the requirements for space. And we'll get into that in some of the next slides, but you can start to see how it builds up. The gray that we've got represented are parking levels. So you can see that, and there are some, and just to get you oriented, the gray box to the rear is the curling club. And just to the right here is the rec center that's existing. And you can also see the skating rink back here. So when we're looking at this, the Cedar Street is just hanging right there. And then this is Front Street. So you'll see that there's 2 levels of parking which are accessed at different points, which you'll see as we get further, but it gives the opportunity for a main entrance off of Front Street, but access to the building from a number of different areas. and Kelsey and Mac, you jump into if that misrepresented. The blue stuff is circulation. So we've got elevators and stairs. There's some nuance in terms of how the building sits on the lot. So in many buildings, we aim towards having 2 stair cores, but in this situation, 3 makes sense as well as the elevator core.
The only one you missed there was the orange box.
That's the whole reason we're here. The orange box is the recreation box. So this is just a natural extension from the fitness center. It's not quite big enough for basketball court, but it's probably how we called it.
Yeah, and it's also shown as a double height space there right now.
Sorry, can we interrupt? 'Cause
Go ahead, Kate.
Thank you. Thanks so much to the chair. I just did quick math on that. It's about 5,000 square feet. Does that sound right? The
That's
orange
correct.
block? Okay, thank you.
So sorry, it will be taller than a floor or not quite 2 floors, but
It is 2 floors. I think it's like diagrammatically about 6 meters.
and how high is the basketball court supposed to be?
There's no, I don't think there's a height maximum, but yeah, that doesn't, 6 meters sounds a little bit low for basketball, volleyball.
Yeah, okay.
But still multi-purpose space.
Yeah, of course.
The area wasn't quite big enough to.
Okay.
And essentially we match the fitness area height too. So that's good.
That's cool. Yeah.
So in this diagram, we've got different colors that represent the different unit types. So we've got 1-bedroom studio, 2-bedroom units, as well as some amenity spaces and 2-bedroom units. And again, the blue is represented as circulation. And then the pink down here is studio, which is sort of a transition space, which I'm sure there's other people that can describe it better, but it's, for people that are, getting into housing for maybe the first time in a while.
And is that, I'm thinking of the Lakeview project, is that what that's called, across from Dairy Queen? Yeah. And there's a number of units on that have their own entrances, they have their own walkway, they're separated out so that there's that privacy that comes with getting that additional support. And that's it. So that would be a similar idea.
I think it's a much better description.
You'd walk into those units independently and they right out onto the street on a side street like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
So that would be off of Cedar Street, which is, you can see on this drawing.
Yeah.
And you can see that, once we test all the aggregate number of units, it works out at 56 units based on this assembly. And, right now, the way that we've been.
My audio's poor.
Did you turn your video off? Sometimes that helps.
Yeah. Is that Tom? Yeah. Tom, you can't hear us right now? Tom, can you hear us right now? Okay, let's pause for a second, just because we have a commissioner who doesn't have access to
Just
the.
while we're paused, how many units are in the building on Hall?
About 44.
And you can get 56 into this much smaller footprint.
Seems a bit, all these are real.
I will
to scale.
But just because we know the commissioner can't hear us right now, I'm going to pause discussion, just as per our policies, to give them a couple minutes to try and reconnect. Kate,
Well,
can you hear us? Go ahead, Tom.
It just breaks up a little periodically and randomly. I can hear you now.
Okay.
Carry on now to try and follow along. It just breaks up maybe for a few seconds or 10 seconds. So I think I can follow along.
I'm just going to check in with Kate and Cheryl, just make sure that it's not on our end. Kate, Cheryl, we're consistent?
I'm having a little bit of breakup too, Tom. It's not just you. It's a couple of seconds here and there, but it's not affecting my ability to follow along. And I've got a copy of this presentation in eScribe, so that's why I have my video off.
Okay, Kate, are you hearing us consistently or is it chopping out for you too?
I think it just might be sometimes the speaker needs to speak more loudly for the owl.
Well, now we can't hear Kate very well. Okay. Okay, Rob, can you project a little bit more?
I'll try and speak more clearly and louder. Okay, so within this, we've got 56 units that fit on the site based on the C1 zoning and the setbacks allowed and the height allowed. So we haven't pursued any consideration for trying to go higher with some kind of comprehensive development zoning. But as you can see, the floor plan is regular and repeated. So, you know, if there was a potential that's something, but I think that's beyond what we're trying to present today. I'll continue on. Sorry, I'm not sure who wants to revisit your question. So.
My question was answered, so I just.
For the benefit of Tom, it was how many units are in the existing Front Street property was the question that had been raised earlier, and what was the answer?
Front Street, 44.
44. Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I'll carry on.
Please.
Hang on. Not responding.
Oh, I saw it show up.
The receiver's over here, Rob, so.
You can just move if you want.
Yeah, do you want to come right here?
Yeah. Oh, way better. Yeah. Okay. So what we've got here are a few different concept floor plans. We'll start with parking because it seems to run our lives in many buildings. So just to get you oriented, on the bottom of the screen is Front Street. On the left would be Cedar. And then on the top would be the access route into the rec center. So we've got access from that side for the parking. And you can see from those 3D diagrams in the pages before, there's a few different layers and access points, but you can start to see how the building arranges itself with elevators and stairs and parking.
This is a 1 to 2 ratio for the units. C1 needs is half as many parking as units.
That's approximately correct. Yeah, because we can divide by 2 for the total number of parking spaces. So it's about 1 per 2 units.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that without a commercial component, it's 1.1 is the factor. So, but we get 50% reduction when we have a combined use building like this.
Okay. So you're going for 1 per unit.
Yeah.
Okay. Or close to.
Pretty close. Yeah, we get up to 50, I think. So it's pretty close. Yeah. So on this plan, you can start to see where the NDCC component takes form, as well as those transitional studios that we've talked about along Cedar Street. And then let's go on to the next one. And this is where you can start to see the form of the building take shape. So when we're at the level where there's the rec center, we've got a separated portion of the building, which is for the housing, which has the 1 bedrooms and 2 bedroom in the studio, and access to the elevator. And then carrying on to the upper floors, it spans over top of where the rec center space is, so that it takes a larger footprint on those upper floors to account for additional units.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
Amenity, what is that referring to?
It's a broad number of things. So within the BC Housing Design Guidelines, which is largely what this is modeled after, they've got a few different requirements. So it can range from, some office space for operations to like a community space for, whatever, shared gatherings, a little kitchen, laundry,
all that stuff. So we tend to bulk it just into area because at this stage it's not as pertinent.
Cheryl, I also see your hand is up. Dave, you don't have Cheryl, go ahead with your question.
Thank you. That was the amenities was one of my questions. But the other question I have is just going back to the parking. Like if I have this correct, you said there's 56 units, but you've got 44 parking spots. So and then there's no visitor parking is there, I'm just wondering if this is going to create a bit of a parking's already a problem.
Yeah, it's a fair question. And I mean, we've got up to 50 within the building. On the site plan, I'll just, now that the mouse is sort of working better, I'll zip back to the very first slide because it's got a few other potentials which take a little bit more discussion. So see this arrow here that says potential lot expansion. It'd be a prime spot to have some additional surface parking. We have a few other levers in place, but it's part of a bit of a larger conversation. I think it's a fair comment. We've provided enough units or enough parking stalls for the housing, but more may be warranted.
Yeah, supplemental here, because when you have 3-bedroom units, I'm just thinking that is a potential for more than one vehicle. And just like I say, it's already such a tight sort of area for parking that I would think, if you have a potential to expand the parking or in that spot that you've identified, then that might be a good idea, just from my perspective. Just a comment.
Okay. Thank you.
So this plan that we're on, it represents sort of the repetitive plans on level 4 to 6. So it's all the same for each of those levels. So there's efficiency to that. And I promised I wouldn't go through the charts, but here's a bunch of area breakdowns from the different levels if you're curious about the big data. As well as some of the other rooms. And that is sort of the bulk of our presentation. And I thought maybe, Max or Kelsey, I'm not sure if there's anything more to add to what I represented.
I don't have any more comments.
No, I think you did a great job, Rob. Okay, well, Kate's got a question. So we'll go to Kate.
Thanks so much. Are there just 56 is wow, that's a lot of density right there. And I think you said that that's what is allowed by the current setbacks and height restrictions. I have a curiosity, is there no, are there any rules around yard space amenity, like user yard amenity outdoor spaces when you have a building of this magnitude?
Yeah, and I can answer that. There are some maximum lot coverage requirements under the C1 zoning. I think it's 90% coverage. So we've adhered to that. There's still a few little spots that are not covered on the rec center access road side. So, this is projecting towards the idea of it aligning with the C1 zoning. So it's proposed as that. In terms of outdoor space, I mean, we've talked about different ways that amenity space could be represented. We all love a good rooftop patio, and those are some of the options that may still persist in different ways. But mostly this is just a test fit to see how it fits within a proposed zone.
Okay, so.
Kate, I'm going to stop you. Can you double check what your mic is on your Zoom call? You're coming in I'm picking up a background, like a headphone sitting on a desk instead of your computer. Because you got a lot quieter since the start of the meeting.
Wow, sorry.
Oh, yeah, now you're good.
Okay. That's weird. Not usually quieter. Okay. Right. So I had a question about but C1 is commercial. So this isn't actually commercial, right?
I mean, C1 describes a zoning which is downtown core commercial, but includes residential as one of the approved uses.
Right. But Okay, so, but we've got humans living in this big space. So I think you need more human space for the humans. That's just my take on C1 versus filling it with residential, which is fine. I have the curiosity around the parking as well, because we have to be realistic about how many cars people in our society use. And then my other question is about that setback from the highway. I know that we have a challenge with the Hall Street building, with snow removal, and I don't think there's access to the parking from the highway. You have to go around the building, but has that been taken into account with the setback? I think that maybe the minimum setback isn't appropriate for snow removal. I just have a curiosity around that.
Yeah, I mean, we were certainly thinking hard about the frontage along the highway. I mean, it's part of why we represented those parking levels facing Front Street, because it's a busy street, and so it seemed more appropriate for the residential to be lifted up from that level. So there's still space accounted for sidewalks and things like that, but it's certainly not a main frontage of the building, except for the entrance to the elevator side, which is set back as well. So it's that little notch in the building there too. So, in terms of what you've described, I think that this is probably our best approximation of allowing for some space for snow removal, but there isn't a lot of space for snow to accumulate either.
So does the building go straight up to the sidewalk because it's commercial zoning?
Yes.
Okay, so I would just want to look at that just from a planning perspective, just from it's humans in the building, it's not commercial, right? So it's living space. So, anyway,
Yeah.
that's my ideas. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Go ahead, Steve.
I'd just like to add a comment. This is really a first crack at it, and I think we've demonstrated the feasibility of putting a substantial building that also provides for parking as well as a substantial recreation space on the property. But going forward, there's ongoing conversations with the recreation staff, and I'm sure there'll be more with others involved in the project. But this is our first look at whether it's feasible to establish a building of sufficient size to warrant going forward with the project.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Tom, I see you. We've got a question.
Thank you. Hey, Rob, how are you doing?
Okay, how about you?
Hey, I'm well, thanks. So in regard to the ultimate financial feasibility of this potentially awesome project, what role would the lease agreement with the Rec 5, how does that kind of impact work out? How is it figured out? What role do we play moving forward, besides the recommendation, of course, that's on the agenda?
I prefer that question because I think that it's, it is a pertinent conversation about, ownership, lease, arrangements and all that stuff. I think Joe spoke a bit more eloquently when we were meeting with him about the potential of it too, but I don't know if you know yet.
Well, I'm going to go to either Craig or Tricia. Otherwise, I'll fill in the gap for Joe.
I think you might be best positioned to, Keith.
Okay. So as far as I understand it, it's taking on through the long-term engagement from the campus review. If the public sees this as a value that they want recreation involved in, and if the long-term needs of the facility, the fitness center specifically, can be addressed through a lease agreement to this public space versus spending the capital up front from taxpayer funds to develop the space, we would flush all of that out within the MOU in terms of what we would commit to for leasing of this space long-term. And those are all a lot of questions still left to be answered and not answered yet. But that's the best I can answer. I'm sure Joe could say it a little bit more eloquently, but.
Well, if I may, that was my assumption, and I guess I want to not hold the project back from moving forward because we haven't made a decision, but the idea of this many housing units in a tight market is pretty, is exciting, I think, for the area. So, yeah, I don't really have much of it's kind of a nebulous thing that we're moving forward with. We're trying to just keep the project moving forward, at least not be a roadblock to the project moving forward. And I do personally support the idea of this moving forward. And I do recommend that I do recognize that our facility is quite full on that weight training area. So I'm sure we could make use of the space if it were all to come together. Anyway, yeah, it's very interesting idea.
Okay, Kate, go ahead.
Thanks so much. Just from a process perspective, can you help me understand the Rec Commission would make a recommendation to the RDCK board because this property belongs to the RDCK, right? So could you just help me understand what the steps would be to consolidate it between a city lot and an RDCK lot? And I mean, the lease agreement recreational component comes later as well.
So this recommendation, should it pass at this commission, would go to the board for further discussion and deliberation. Because it is RDCK land and the contracts can only be entered into at the RDCK level. So whenever we pass something like that at commission, it goes to get discussed again at the board level. My understanding from talking to Nelson Cares is the project as we're seeing it as a box today all the lands would have to be consolidated into one lot to build that project, which makes a kind of logical sense. The other piece here, which might come out in the memorandum of understanding, there's two questions. Do we need this space in our future expansion, and therefore we need to have an interest in it, or do we not need this space? And so if we're flushing out the details and it's determined for whatever reason that we actually don't need these lots and they're not going to be used in a further expansion, we're going to do something else, we're going to go up instead of go sideways, that orange box, can that be reclassified as more residential?
Well, absolutely.
Okay. And so then if through the MOU we decide we do need the space, then that kind of kicks into going down the path of leasing that floor back out over the long term, over the course of the building. But if we don't need the space, then they can reincorporate it into more residential, and the board and this commission could discuss letting go of that space, letting go of those lots completely. Is that prompting another question, Kate?
Yeah, and then my other question I think goes back to the proponents here. I know that you had said that there is allowed 30% of square footage for non-residential, and that doesn't look like the amount that we have here. Could you give it to me as a percent of what we're looking at for non-residential?
I'd have to refer just to the C1 zoning, but I think that they didn't attribute a specific percentage. The BC housing.
Yeah.
Oh, my mistake. Yeah, and I mean, truly, I think that this would probably be, not strictly adhered to from the design guidelines because it's a bit more of a integrated approach. And there's lots of precedent for BC housing doing that. There's projects in the Lower Mainland which have recreation predominantly on the ground floor and then residential above. So I think that would probably be just a thoughtful conversation with the folks at BC Housing about doing the right thing instead of sticking to the guidelines.
I didn't understand your answer. Sorry. What-
30% is a suggested, the 30% can be adjusted. There, you can ask BC Housing for accommodation for something beyond
Yeah,
30%.
they make exception for deviations from the BC housing design guidelines on occasion.
So
And
it
this
was
would be-
up to 30%. And what are we looking at here in this like concept?
I don't know if I could sort of pin down a percentage, but I'm not even sure if it's that far off from 30% because, you know, the parking is largely attributed to the housing as well. So recreation is maybe less than the 30%.
Recreation is less than 10%, so it wouldn't, it's less than the 30%.
Right. So I'm curious about what it would look like to get closer to the 30%, given that this is part of our recreation complex. And just curiosity on that as well.
Well, it would be that whole tower then. It's 10%. Triple it.
There's also all of the amenity circulation service spaces count towards the 30% for BC Housing's purposes. Everything that's not a residential suite. So even though the recreation space isn't 30%, we need a lot of the rest of it in those other spaces.
The circulation counts?
Yeah, circulation counts. So we are approaching the 30% with the rec space and everything else in the building.
Okay, thanks.
They've got an efficiency ratio target that we have to hit, and that's sort of part of it. So that the ratio between occupied residential space and everything else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Cheryl, I saw you next, and then Tom.
Thank you. My question is around your timeline to funding application chart that's in this report. And I get, you know, and I like the project, everything's good. I'm just curious. It says RDCK public consultation, and that looks like it is scheduled to begin in a couple, like in September. Like, how does that consultation happen? Like, what's involved with that? And at the same time, I guess, we're also doing this campus study. So I'm just trying to understand how this is it the same or is it different?
So I'll answer that. We're in this would be one of those chicken and the egg issues, but the long-term campus review is the public consultation. The purpose of bringing this report into the public sphere is so the public has information available when they're doing that consultation to answer the question of, do you support working on affordable housing as part of what Rec Commission is involved in for this kind of work? So they are the same thing. The questions we have going into the long-term campus review, public engagement will have questions specifically around, does the public support something like this? So they're the same thing. And the MOU, should something like that be developed, would speak to what directions we might move based on public consultation, right? Like that would be the understanding that we would draft out. Because we don't know what the public will say. We have a sense, but we don't know. Or what they want.
So just supplemental, would the public be given the option to say, we like this, but we want to have a little more recreation space, or like, will they be given sort of options like that? Or I guess we just have to wait and see. Chicken and egg.
It wouldn't be project specific. It would be within the campus itself. Do you think affordable housing is compatible use, just like a theater might be compatible use, just like curling or any other thing might be compatible use? It won't be. This will inform them in a sense of what could be possible, but it's not going to be about this project, right? Because Tom.
There we go. Now just bear with me. I got to change screens. Chair, my question is in regard to the motion that may be moved and seconded. The question specific to that motion, should we wait till the delegation is dismissed so that we can do the business, or how do we see that happening?
Interesting. It wasn't. We could. That's a request.
Let me ask. Maybe I'll ask my question.
Sure.
You can rule it whether it should wait or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're asked to enter into a memorandum of understanding, which is specifically stating to actually move, the way I read it is to actually move forward, saying we're going for this because we're going to integrate public recreation space into the project. A memorandum of understanding has some legitimacy of commitment. And we're nowhere near committing, but yet we want to help things go forward. So I just wonder if the wording of the motion is actually accurate, that we can actually enter into a memorandum of understanding because we haven't got a understanding yet ourselves.
So I want to provide some context for this one. I kind of mulled whether we put, not enter, I was considering putting draft in here. My thought process is what, at some point we would have to ratify whatever agreement came out of this, so the draft seemed redundant. But I thought enter, then at some point that will be drafted and then that will come to the board. And that's when we'll actually decide to enter into it. So I thought we would be okay with this wording.
So if I may, then this wording, by definition of how this actually is worded, does not commit the board to anything. It commits the board is committing to moving forward with the process.
I think the way this reads, we may want to change this to board directs staff to develop a memorandum of understanding for consideration. I think that's better wording for your concern. And I do not.
Well, we cannot say to the board, Rec 5 cannot say to the board, hey, we're all in on this. We don't know the money. We don't know we literally can't do this. We can't say to the board, we can do this because we can't. I don't think.
We could change, when this move, if someone would move this, I would suggest that we change direct staff to enter to direct staff to develop a memorandum of understanding.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I think that would let the board know we're on in a process. So thanks. Yeah, that's great, Chair. I think that does.
Do you want to move that?
I'll move it.
Okay.
Draft, enter, direct staff to draft a memorandum of understanding.
Okay. Draft. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Kate. Okay. Any further questions? Cheryl, I see your hand up again. Go ahead.
Similar to what Tom is saying, I'm looking at point 2, saying that the RDCK donate the land adjacent to the property owned by the city of Nelson for the assembly into a single parcel. Wouldn't that be subject to a plan being approved? Because what if something happens and this doesn't get approved? Then we've moved a motion saying that it's now one lot. So
that's not the.
She's looking at actually the information's from Steve.
Yeah, so let's just separate out the request as Nelson Cares put it to us versus what we put in the recommendation, having digested that request. So we took what they asked for, and in our recommendation in your report under 8.1, we picked out the things that made sense from an RDCK perspective, which is the MOU, that we would develop an MOU of how we would proceed as this project moved forward, as opposed to actually doing these things. We would agree how we would do these things.
There's a second part of the overall presentation yet to come that I think will help clarify some of these issues.
Okay. Well, then we better move on to that before. We've got a motion on the table. We can leave it on the table for now. If you have more to present, then let's do that.
Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Maybe I'll just
wonder if we could take a 5-minute break.
Sure.
I've got people here and I've got family here and I need and I can't go a ton longer, but if we could have.
We're gonna make it 9 minutes. We're gonna break until 10 minutes after 11.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's a good time for it. Thanks for the call. Nobody talked about anything.
saying, well, actually, okay.
Tom, are you back?
Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
Given that 30% of the overall budget is land.
We're just seeing about Commissioner Newell.
We can.
So that's our 10 minutes, making sure we have full complement, and we do. So let's continue on.
Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
In respect to quorum, Director Newell, Commissioner Newell, Tom Newell will be leaving at 11:30.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we've got a few additional pieces of information from Steve from Nelson Cares. So go ahead, Steve.
Sure, I'll need the mouse.
So we got 29 minutes.
You've got,
19.
well, we got all the time in the world, because
No, 19. We got 19 minutes.
19 minutes.
That's how that works.
We'll still have,
But it'd be nice.
How many, were the 5 of us are the voting members? So without Tom, do we still have quorum, right?
We do. We would still have quorum.
New guy question.
I think we can. I'm just setting a mark. I think we can not need it.
Commissioner Newell's still part of the
Cheryl's here.
group.
Do we need both of them or just one?
Are you? Just one.
Okay.
Which one are you using here?
Commissioner Graham has to leave at noon as well. She put in the chat.
Okay, yeah, we're gonna be done by then.
We better be done by noon.
This is our last meeting.
So while we're sitting around talking, or waiting for Steve to get us things, just a reminder that we're gonna have the official opening of the Moby Yacht at 3 o'clock this coming Friday at Lakeside Park. So that's the wheelchair accessibility mat with the wheelchair. And that's a cooperative venture between the RDCK, the City of Nelson, and of course the Rotary Club of Nelson, who are the funders there. The RDCK will be keeping the floating wheelchair in with the canoes and kayaks. It's free to utilize it at this point, and then other upkeep and maintenance of other things will be done by the City of Nelson. So it's a collaborative effort, and it's really exciting. And many thanks to the Rotary Club of Nelson for raising the funds to have this, to increase the access to our beachfront. So there. You said that I wanted to say something during this meeting, and I mean, we're just gonna run all the time.
Sure, that should have been in Ryan's report, but literally the email from the city as far as all kind of, it's all falling into place this week.
Yeah, it's just all falling in this week, so.
Absolutely.
Being shared now.
Okay, can you see what's being shared on the screen? Yeah, they can see it. Okay. Thanks for that update, Mayor Morrison. That's gonna be a lot of fun. It's great for all those with mobility issues.
Okay, so what I'd like to do here is just give an overview of the timelines of the various milestones that we need to accomplish on our way to submitting an application for the Community Housing Fund. Okay, how do I
left click? You've got your right click up right now, and then again.
All right, so a little more.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so just to go back to what you heard from Cover, our proposal, and I want to emphasize this is a first draft, and we're very flexible about the options. But from our first draft here, we have a building with 56 residential units, and currently designed with 5,000 square feet of recreation space, but that could be increased. It's just simply a trade-off between housing and recreation. And the proposal also provided for parking that would meet the requirements of the zoning. Something I want to emphasize is we do go forward with this. The building could be completed at no capital cost to either the city or the RDCK. There are some pretty tight deadlines, but the BC Housing will fully fund the pre-development planning pieces that need to go into a project like this. We've already received some funding from the Economic Development Partnership and the city. And the Columbia Basin Trust is also willing to match those funds with some support for the initial phase of the project. That's an option. If the RDCK was interested in making a capital contribution, that's also something that could be worked out. So as everyone's aware, the Housing Action Plan was tabled in the spring. There's a number of specific actions that were identified that would contribute to affordable housing, expanding affordable housing in the regional district. And the one I think that is relevant to the current project was that municipal and regional district owned sites be identified that are appropriate for affordable housing, and that sites that could be developed in partnership with a nonprofit also be identified. So that pretty much describes the situation where we're at right now. However, we need to go one step further, and that is we've identified the site, but we need to do some work with assembling the land that would be the basis for the building. And as you saw in the earlier presentation, the city has already offered the main piece of property here where my mouse is. There's an adjacent piece that's owned by the regional district. And then there's some of these other smaller fringe areas which could be useful as potential future parking or other uses. This BC Housing would require that the land be assembled into a single parcel for consideration of any development. So our overall timeline to our January 2025 deadline for making an application to the Community Housing Fund, the first steps are obtaining support from the Recreation Commission, and then getting formal support from the RDCK board and city council at their August meetings. The next steps would be preparing an application for pre-development funding that would be submitted to BC Housing. The timeline I'm showing you now is the same as what we viewed at the last meeting, but with one significant change. We were advised by BC Housing last Friday that we should submit our application for pre-development funding by the end of August. There is a possibility that that funding is going to be withdrawn. So they've more or less told us that to ensure success with obtaining the funding, August 31st would be the recommended deadline. And I should say, without the funding for pre-development, really the project can't move forward. So I've got August in yellow here because it's turning out to be a bit of a pressure cooker month. After submission of the application, it'll be reviewed and hopefully approved by BC Housing, but that's another 6 to 8 week process. So if we are successful, then we would be retaining a development consultant who would be preparing the final application for Community Housing Fund. That is a process that could take as much as 3 months to complete, with Christmas intervening. And ongoing during this would be a rezoning process to amend the zoning to suit the use that we're proposing. And we're thinking that we'd like to see that started in early September. It's a 4 to 6 month process. And while that's all occurring, we've been in discussion with the RDCK recreation staff, and there's an ongoing public consultation process that is also starting early September. So that's pretty much the outline I wanted to convey here, and just I guess to emphasize, we are facing a sort of an imminent and fairly crucial deadline with the need to submit a pre-development fund application by the end of August. We have had discussion with Columbia Basin Trust, and they're willing to support us financially and provide us with a development consultant who could assemble the application. The development consultant also has the capacity to do that. But going forward, typically they don't support applications where the land has not already been assembled. They are willing to be flexible and support this application, but they're looking for a stronger indication that there's willingness by the RDCK to provide the land, the peripheral land, or the land adjacent to the city lands that the city has already offered.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, well,
look at that.
so we have a motion before us, moved and seconded to do that, to lay out, develop the terms by which we would proceed. The main pillars being, what does it look like to integrate public space? What does it look like in terms of recovering staff time that's working on this? What does it look like to collaborate with external funders like BC Housing and CBT from an RDCK side, so staff to staff can have conversations about what's necessary? And what does it look like to establish final land disposition terms, or what will we be looking for to sign over this land? Does that work with all the other points? Staff would develop this MOU, and then it would come to the board for discussion and adoption at some later date. I would anticipate within that conversation that RDCK staff would talk to BC Housing and CBT. That's the direction being given to firm up government to government. You know, where are the hard stops in this kind of process? What do we need to provide for assurances? And that's what the commission has before them today. So, are there any other questions? Go ahead, Morrison.
Thanks, Paige. I'm hearing some issues around timeline, and I think that we're fortunate that we have Nelson Cares wanting to be the proponent for this development, given that BC Housing knows that they're a good actor and they're not new to the table and are shooting off ideas into the stratosphere and seeing something sticks like spaghetti. But I do have some concerns in terms of, and it's unfortunate that Joe's in here, but perhaps some of the other staff can answer the question, in terms of getting this something so that they can have it before the end of August. So we only have one more meeting of the RDCK at the full table, and to what extent are we expecting to see this MOU fleshed out to be coming to the board? And do we have the timeline? Let's not fool ourselves here. Do we have the time for the RDCK staff to bring something to the table for the next district meeting? Staff, but
I'll take a stab at that bit through the chair. The next board meeting is the 15th, I believe, 15th of August, and that is tight for us to get, because that would be the next opportunity and the best opportunity to get the support for this would be at the board. So we would miss this commission, obviously, and go straight to the board. And so that puts us probably Tuesday latest to have something drafted for them if they allow us to put that on the agenda. So that gives us literally 4 days. Okay.
And,
Hold on, Sue.
well, to add to Craig's comment, there's no way we can do that without Joe's involvement, and Joe's just been off for 2 weeks, and is not back even in the area till Tuesday. So it's not even like we have an opportunity to connect with him. So the timeline of even just the requirements to get something on the board, it's difficult to assume that we could do that with any degree of integrity with something going forward.
Totally, yeah.
I mean, it can always be a late agenda item. I mean, I'm not without having sat around the table to know that things come late to the board, but it is about the fact, even 2 weeks, I'm still just trying to figure this out. I just realized it would be so much, because the RD doesn't run like city council. If we were councilors sitting around the table, we could say, yeah, and then delegate some poor staff member to throw everything on the floor and work on this particular project for, 48 hours until they got it done.
No weekends for you.
I just have some concerns there in terms of trying to meet, and is there some other, I think we need to pass this motion so that this work can be done, but is there something else that we need to be passing or contemplating to be able to give Nelson Cares, as they put this project together with this now moved up considerably timelines by BC Housing to get this pre-development money. So somebody can have it. That's for that question.
Hold on, Sue. So is the question an additional component to the motion, something like an agreement in principle to dispose of the land? The things that occur to me too is I would like staff to chat with BC Housing, as it's pretty common for motions like this to pass, but then subsequent motions to support them to come 30 or potentially 60 days later. Just understanding meeting cycles. So is there flexibility within BC Housing to have parts of these things in motion and accept that? I suspect the pre-development fund timeline is being respectful of the writ dropping in the third week of September and wanting to get that kind of stuff squared away before the legislature dissolves. During that time, not knowing what the other end of the election would be, but having these things approved and out the door and moving forward is probably why they want to get there. But what they need from local government to lock that in might have some flexibility later. But I think we need staff to have those conversations, which this motion does.
But I think we need something else. We need this motion.
Do we want staff to bring something to the board? Do we need staff to give direction to bring us? Think about that exact question and bring that to the board.
Well, I think we need another motion of some sort, I think, Chair Page, that would end up on the table when you meet on August 15th. So that there's a letter that Nelson Cares can have in their pocket as part of their proposal going forward. I don't know what it looks like. I didn't come prepared with anything to this meeting.
Sure.
So I didn't know what direction the discussion was going to take, but I think we have to have something else, because what this motion is asking for is something that takes more time, probably 60 or 90 days. In the meantime, we have a group that is keen to pursue something, but needs pre-development money, and I think that issue cannot be lost on a go-forward basis and needs to be at the table on the 15th.
Okay, can we take that as direction to staff right now?
To bring this back to the board at the.
Well, when it comes to the board, that we're going to need, we need staff to touch base with Nelson Cares and with BC Housing and figure out what the requirements are and bring that forward to the board as well.
15th.
Yeah.
We can, I'm going to loop in the CAO on this as well, and then we'll try to connect with him today. But that is, you can give staff that direction at this point.
Are you comfortable with that? What do you want? Mm-hmm. Because we are sending a letter, like the board will send a letter of support as part of this motion. But it's not agreeing in principle to release the land until after the MOU is designed. So I'm just trying to wonder what we would pass as another motion. Can
I'll
we,
leave it to the chair because I'm hearing from staff that the full MOU cannot be developed by August 15th.
yeah, I'm hearing that too.
And I think I think to me, that's what this motion is about, is the development of something more robust. In the meantime, you know, if you're telling me a letter of support, like I'm not seeing that a letter of support is part of this process. I'm seeing that perhaps as a separate motion or direction to staff, chair, however you'd like that.
The recommendation as it is right now is a letter of support, and then further is the MOU.
Yeah. So, but it's all together, so I don't want to, maybe it needs to be separated out so that we have two things going on. So that something comes to the board on August 15th, which unfortunately won't be the MOU.
Well, so in the process of these meetings, we're often conferring with other staff that are in the background. So Mark Crow, if I think he's on his phone right now.
Share that.
He had put forward some wording, and I don't know how this resonates with people, and I don't mean to take us off topic,
No.
but it might, and my apologies if it is, because I'm just literally trying to wrap my head around it myself. But the recommendation he posed was twofold again. So one was that the board send a letter of support to the Nelson Care Society for the application to BC Housing and the City of Nelson for a potential workforce below market housing project to be located at blah, blah, blah. And that the board authorizes staff to complete the necessary needs assessment and feasibility analysis work for the recreational component of the potential project in accordance with Service S226 standards, including consideration of the established preferred method of project coordination with Nelson Care Society, inclusion of additional space for the Nelson Rec Complex, campus study, recovery of staff time costs, collaboration with external funders, and establish preferred framework for agreements such as a memorandum of understanding, contracts, agreements, and lands disposition.
Well, that's a step before an MOU.
But it might give, if the BC Housing accepts it as an indication of support that we're moving in this direction, I'm wondering if that might still meet the needs of the August 31st deadline.
I don't hear much different in that. Janice, what do you think?
Well, I think
Hold on, Kate.
I think there's a bit more clarity in what you've just read there in terms of direction of what's in front of us. Sorry, right now it is a bit of a change. I think it might be.
There is one last step that I didn't catch it as I was reading it, but that the board then authorizes the CAO the authority to review and approve the initial application to BC Housing and authorize the component of the potential project located on the RDCK owned property.
Yeah, that makes a bit more sense to me, but
Okay.
I'm just one person sitting here. I think.
Kate, go ahead. And you're quiet again, so maybe double check your mic.
Okay, I'm a bit confused because it's the board. Are we making a motion for the RDCK board? Or are we the commission is the board in this motion? I'm a bit confused. I'm sorry, because I didn't think that the commission can release the land, the RDCK board.
And it can. So how this will come forward to the board will be as a recommendation from commission, and then.
Okay, so so actually what we're moving is that we recommend to the board, blah, 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 blah.
Completely.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you. Thank you so much.
Sure, go ahead, Steve. So I think I can address the concerns that Janice was raising and the concern over the August 30 deadline is something as simple as a recommendation by the commission to the board that the RDCK donate the adjacent lands for assembly into a single parcel. Just that simple statement alone, I think, would satisfy some of the concerns of the external funders. Specifically, I mean, that's exactly what the Columbia Basin Trust told us would help them facilitate providing us the funding to hire the consultant to prepare this application. So a recommendation to the board that the RDCK donate the adjacent lands would be sufficient at this point in time. And that's understanding that going through the memorandum process, we're going to have to develop a more specific understanding of how that's going to work. But the end goal is to assemble it in a single parcel that would be leased to the to Nelson Cares or BC Housing for the building.
Go ahead, Tom.
That
I'm gonna lose them too.
sits a little better for me. And then we would get an easement on that so we can access our rink and what have you.
But
We're talking.
Well, there's a little bit of land jig there that has to go on. I mean, if you look at
Well,
There
no,
is,
I recognize we need it as well access. So it would somehow work out. It's with these tight time. All I'm saying is with these tight timelines, it becomes very difficult to do full, for me, due diligence, and we need to involve our public. For Area F, who significantly have a significant, their highest portion of their tax bill is Rec 5. So I can't just say, hey, let's go ahead with it. I've tried to reiterate that there needs to be a significant acceptance by the Area F taxpayers to significantly increase the budget for Rec 5. So I'm trying to move this along and not put roadblocks up and say, well, no, we need to go to referendum before we do anything. I just don't want to mislead people. I am not saying we support this yet. I am saying I support the moving forward of this, but there are so many considerations moving forward that, as I said, I just don't want to mislead people that, hey, Director Newell was all for this project. I'm for not stopping the process right now. So
I agree with you.
I'll just be quiet.
I think what's important here is what Tom has touched on is recreation has its own purposes and needs and needs to evaluate things at a pace it's able to evaluate them. That we are aware of an external funding requirement for the end of the month. We can provide staff with direction to look for places where we can support that. But that timeline is coming from an externality. And at this junction, we're talking about what this would look like to add that additional space to achieve these mutual goals. And I think we need to do that planning and we need to be aware of that timing, but I don't think we can solve the timing here at this table today necessarily. And I think we need to look for whatever flexibility is possible within that. And we need to give staff the direction to do that legwork. So if there are no further questions, I'm going to call the question. Are there any objections to the motion as recommended? All those in favor?
sorry, we have the motion that was recommended that was read out by the staff person that's in the room.
Okay.
Do you take any offense to the, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, I don't.
Tricia.
Tricia, thank you.
So Tom, we're going to read out the motion from Mark Crow again, and we'll evaluate whether or not we want to let one fail and do the other.
So through the chair, I can read it out in components for ease of digestion. So the first part is that the board send a letter to support the Nelson Care Society for the application to BC Housing and the City of Nelson for a potential workforce/below market housing project to be located on RDCK owned property between the Nelson and District Community Complex and 824 Front Street.
So same as before.
Yeah, that's the first one. Part two, that the board authorize.
Can we pause?
Yeah, pause.
I'd like to move that we divide, and so I support this. So let's can we deal with this one right now and then?
Great. Yeah, so move division. Do we vote on that?
No, I don't think we have to vote on division.
Okay, so yeah, I'll accept it.
Now,
So let's vote on the first part, the letter of support. Any objection? Is there a seconder for the second part?
I'll
I'll
second
second
that.
that.
Morrison, Tom, are there any objections?
No, does
Is
it
there a
not have to,
question?
wait, hello?
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Does it not have to say that the rec commission recommends that the board send a thing? We can't move that the board send a letter.
It's a recommendation coming from the commission.
Yeah, it'll come up as a recommendation coming from commission.
Okay, just making sure. Thank you.
It comes up in that section of the agenda.
Okay, any objections to the letter of support? All those in favor? That carries. Okay,
Part 2 is that the board authorizes staff to complete the necessary needs assessment and feasibility analysis work for the recreational component of the potential project in accordance with Service S226 standards, including consideration of established preferred method of project coordination with Nelson Care Society. Number 2, inclusion of additional space for Nelson and District Community Complex expansion. 3, the campus study. 4, recovery of staff time costs. 5, collaboration with external funders. And 6, establish preferred framework for agreements such as memorandum of understanding, contracts, agreements, and land disposition terms.
and there was more with Stuart.
Yeah, and then the, I guess, final component of that is that the board authorizes the chief administrative officer the authority to review and approve the initial application to BC Housing to authorize the component of the potential project located on RDCK owned property.
Okay. So I'm unclear, just so we can check with staff, after division, is there other motions still moved and seconded? Or are we just dividing and removing and re-seconding? Like, do we have that second part of the motion on the table now? After we've divided that? And do we have to defeat it to have a conversation about what was just read out?
I think because we brought the
I'd like to
motion forward.
withdraw my motion if this,
There we go, there. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for
Okay,
withdrawal.
motion's withdrawn. Okay,
as long as
Does
the
anyone
seconder approves.
yeah. Kate, do you approve withdrawing the second part of the divided motion that was in the recommendation? Kate does. Would anyone like to move the preferred recommendation that, the other recommendation?
I'll move what's just been read.
Okay, Morrison, any seconders? Seconded by Tom.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay, any more discussion?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Kate.
Sorry. So that part about the CAO, I find it a little bit confusing because if the land has to be built into one piece of land, would that it not be a City of Nelson piece of land?
No, it's the RDCK has land there as well, so that those two pieces have to be put together.
Yes.
So Stuart would probably sign off just like Kevin would sign off when we hand over the land or whatever we feel is the disposition to Nelson Cares. Somebody has to sign it at the very end.
And then in the end, when it becomes one piece of land, who's collecting taxes on it? Like,
Well, we would always collect taxes. The RDCK does not,
It's a city.
the RDCK
You
doesn't,
probably have a PTE, so.
and the RDCK has no taxation collection powers within the city of Nelson.
Yeah.
Right? But-
And we don't collect taxes on the rink or the swimming pool now because it's another government agency, so. And if we could charge taxes on the accommodation part, it wouldn't be on the recreation part. We would parse it out like we do for churches, where churches are statutory and the parking lots pay. It does get a little bit, when you get down the road that barricade, it does get more confusing, but.
Okay, well, I went a little farther down the road because it's all on the same square footage as we go up.
Okay. Any further questions? Go ahead, Cheryl.
Sorry, I'm with Kate here on the CAO signing off on this thing. Like, doesn't this come back to the rec commission and then the board again? Like, I'm just confused on the process of what this motion is doing.
I heard the wording of the motion was the CO is empowered to approve the application. Is that what I heard?
That the CAO have the authority to review and approve the initial application to BC Housing to authorize the component of the potential project.
So he can, so it's not the completion, the board would still actually vote on the actual disposition of the land, but this moves it along. Okay, seeing some nodding heads, any objections? Calling the question, all those in favor, hands high. Perfect, motion carries. That takes us pretty much on cue to our action items, which if anyone wants to lift anything out of our amazing action items, which keep us on track, please let me know. Please don't bring me up. Let's go over to public time at 11:45. Do you have anyone from the public who would like to ask a question of the commission?
Just before you go, I have to sign off, so I will leave now. Thank you very much.
Thanks for waiting that 15 minutes, Tom.
Okay, bye now.
Any questions from the public? We've got iPhone and Observer. Hearing none. Our next meeting is August 28th, just before the end of the month. Serendipitously, 2024. And if there's any adjustments that need to be made there, seeing none, can I have someone do adjournment? Moved by Cheryl. And I think that's it. We're done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark's recommendation.
Thank you, everybody.
Whatever. I think you guys I do have to talk to BC Housing and see where they're switching all that on.
Thanks, everybody.
Because if the board motion can come 30 days after.
So if you do the two recommendations.